there, guys. I'm here today with Shawn Hudson from One Key Escrow. Hey, Shawn.
Hi, how you doing?
Good, thanks. Appreciate your time being here.
Of course, of
I know
course.
you have a busy schedule, out there at One Key in Northridge, so I don't want to be too long. But I have a lot of first-time buyers that are, interested in learning the process of escrow and get some of their questions answered that might be holding them back from who knows what. So, what does it mean when you're a first-time buyer to be in escrow?
Okay, so being an escrow isn't exclusive to first-time buyers,
Okay.
but as a first-time buyer, what you kind of need to know when you're going through the escrow process is that escrow's job is to kind of protect everybody's interest. So one, to make sure that the seller fulfills their obligations in the contract via either closing timely, providing a home warranty, providing HOA documents, disclosures, all that. But then on the buyer side, they also have an obligation to the seller to close that transaction. So they have to make sure that they have their loan in place, their insurance in place, all the certain financial aspects to get us to the closing table so they can ultimately sign loan documents, fund that loan, and close.
Okay, perfect. So it sounds like you are mastering all of these different departments and people and managing all that. So you're basically in charge at that point when it gets to escrow.
Yeah. Yeah, so when it comes to, I mean, so the agents still have, their certain responsibilities to make sure that disclosures and,
All the documents are in
inspections and
place.
stuff like that go through, but we really are kind of the hub of the wheel, so to speak. So we're the middleman between the buyer, the seller, the listing agent, the selling agent,
And the lender, right?
lender, the title company. You have various personalities involved in the transaction, and it all kind of filters at some point in time through escrow.
Okay. So escrow is responsible for reaching out to all parties involved to cross all the T's and dot all the I's, right?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So what should the buyer and seller expect the process to look like? Like what's a typical escrow timeline in a normal day?
So a typical escrow is going to be anywhere from 30 to 45 days, depending on the
Okay.
transaction. And most of that time is more for the lender, the buyer's lender, to be able to perform. Here in escrow, if everybody signs their documents timely, I mean, we can really probably close an escrow in about 2 weeks.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
but a lot of that, you know, the why escrows are 30 to 45 days has to do with the lenders and the underwriting to get the buyer approved to
To get
get to,
everybody to perform.
yeah, to get to that closing table. Because ultimately the loan documents is what gets us in
Initiates.
that position to really be able to close escrow.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for the loan documents, obviously we're ordering HOA documents, ordering any required city reports. We're getting all of those things in, which are the responsibility of the seller to provide. But again, we
And
have.
then during escrow also is when the seller has to comply with any of the contingencies that were in place, correct? Right? So that's
Actually, the seller's responsibilities are to provide certain documents to the buyer
okay.
in a certain period of time, so the buyer has ample time to review them before the removal of the buyer's contingencies.
Gotcha. Okay, good to know. Thank you for that. So what do the buyers and the sellers have to do besides provide the documents? Is there anything that they're responsible for without besides that?
So through escrow, the stuff that we need, what's going to happen is we're going to get a contract in. Once that contract comes in, we're going to do a basic data entry and we're going to send out wire instructions to the
Okay.
buyer. And
Yeah.
then that buyer, they have 3 business days after acceptance to get that deposit into escrow.
That's the earnest money, correct?
That's the earnest money, correct. So they have 3 business days after that offer is accepted to get those funds into us. Once those funds come into escrow, we then do the kind of wrap up of the data entry. We generate escrow instructions, which is basically an attachment to the purchase agreement that says that what portions of the purchase agreement we're going to act on. What are we going to order?
Right.
You know,
Like what's your part in the play?
yeah. And then with those escrow instructions goes a laundry list of other documents for them to complete. So on the seller side, we're going to look to collect their loan information. Who's their lender? What's their loan number? So we can order the payoff demand, because the seller has to pay off their existing loans in order to transfer clear title to the buyer. We're going to ask the seller to complete, if it's in the city of Los Angeles, a 9A application, and we're going to collect a method of payment from them to pay for that report. Along with statement of information, which is where the seller provides us name, social, addresses, so the title company can do.
And what's the 9A?
So the 9A report is the residential report of property records for the city of Los Angeles.
Okay.
It gives some basic zoning information.
Oh, good.
And then it tells whether or not the sewer permit has been issued.
I
And
see.
what we're looking for is if there's any abatement liens. So if the city of LA, if the fire department goes out to the property and notices that there's not a certain amount of brush clearance from the property,
Gotcha.
then they're going to issue a notice to the seller to do the brush.
Take care of that.
If they don't do it, I think it's on the second or third attempt, the fire department does it for them.
And then
Fire department,
charges them, correct?
exactly. They don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. They actually then charge them.
And that's on the seller side, right?
That's on the seller side, yeah.
Okay.
It's very rare that we have those liens pop up, but
Okay.
the only place they show up is on that 9A report, and then we have to order a demand from the fire department in order to get clearance to close.
So in order to see that, you're the one vetting the title report and seeing if there's any clouds or any discrepancies, correct?
Yeah, we're one. I mean, we're the main one that does it, but
Gotcha.
it's also, the buyer's responsibility to review the preliminary title report, not so much for liens and encumbrances, but to make
Right.
sure that they're okay with
The
the
title
legal
insurance.
they want to make sure that they're okay with the legal description, if there's any easements. So pretty much every
Mello-Roos, all that kind of stuff.
within the city, yeah. So you'll have various like utility companies, right? So I would say the phone company, but the phone company doesn't really exist anymore. But you'll have cable providers, utility
Sure.
providers,
Like transferable utilities and the like.
yeah. Well, almost every property has some sort of easement either under or above a property, right?
Interesting.
So if there's gas lines that run underneath a property, the
Yeah.
gas company will have an easement to make repairs.
Interesting. Okay. Good to
It's
know,
all- it's
because
all
like
for
that's not
repair.
something you think about. Yeah. And
So
what's an above one? Like the phone lines?
yeah.
Okay. Wow. There's so many things that normal people wouldn't even recognize. So I appreciate you like giving us all this insight, because you're a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
And then so it sounds like you are independent from agents and lenders and stuff. You're just kind of making sure the process is moving smoothly in an objective manner, because
Exactly.
you don't have
We're
any duty to anyone but the actual sale, right?
yeah, for a better lack of we're Switzerland, right?
Neutral.
But we're Switzerland with a fiduciary responsibility. So we have to make sure that certain things are taken care of and paid for.
Sure.
And also to make sure that,
Like notarizing the documents and like all that kind of stuff.
yeah. The notary is kind of separate. It just kind of
okay.
hand in hand with, being a notary and working in escrow.
Yeah.
But we actually source out a lot of our files that require notary to outside notaries, just because my job is better served like working the file, looking at the documents, than spending an hour doing a loan signing.
Sure. And then I think one last question for you before we head out. Probably one of the biggest things that you always hear about in real estate transactions is closing costs. So what are closing costs, and then who's responsible for that, and what does that entail?
Okay, so the buyer and seller, they each have their own quote unquote set of closing costs.
Okay.
So they're each going to pay an escrow fee. They're
okay.
And then
you got to make money somehow.
Yeah, exactly. So they'll each, like the buyer will have their set of escrow fees, the seller will have their set of escrow fees. As far as title goes, the seller has to provide and pay for owner's title insurance.
Okay.
If the buyer's getting a loan, then they have to provide their lender with a policy of title insurance to secure the lender's interest in the property.
I see.
If the buyer's paying cash, then they don't have that fee.
Okay. Does the lender have to choose the home warranty, or like are they responsible for like dictating how that works, or they're just approving?
Yeah, it's not home warranty.
Oh, okay.
It's the title insurance.
Title insurance, right? Correct.
Yeah,
Thank you for correcting me. Yeah,
yeah. And typically the title insurance is the same company that the seller's using for the owners.
I see.
They technically can have two separate title companies,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
but when they do that,
It's
then the
too
buyer doesn't
costly.
then the buyer doesn't benefit from what's called the simultaneous rate. Okay.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So there's a standalone rate on the lender's title insurance where let's just say the seller wanted, First American title
Sure.
and the buyer wanted Stewart title and they
Okay.
couldn't come together and meet. Then we technically can order two preliminary title reports,
Okay.
where the seller would pay for the owner's policy of title insurance, um, for their portion, and then the buyer could go through another title insurance company for their lender. But the rate difference, if the buyer uses the seller's company, they get a discount on that title insurance rate.
Gotcha. So it's in their
Versus,
best interest to
yeah,
continue with the current situation. Okay, well
exactly.
that's good to know. I mean, I would gather that probably two different title companies would find the same type of information, so it's just kind of redundant
Exactly.
at that point, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah. And that's the point of the title insurance, right? Is that to make sure that it's free and clear of any encumbrance.
transferable. Yeah.
And then, the seller will have transfer taxes,
Okay.
and that's based on the purchase price and where the property is located. So any property that, let's just say LA County. So from one county to the next, they all have $1.10 per $1,000 of purchase price for transfer tax.
Right.
But then when you get into localities, okay, so City of Los Angeles has a transfer tax of $4.50 per thousand on properties under 5 million. Uh,
Okay.
and then properties over 5 million, there's a 4.5% tax, not $4.50 per thousand, but 4.5%.
Yikes.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's called the mansion tax. It's new.
Sure.
It just kicked off
Is
earlier
that a
this year.
one-time tax or?
It's a one. So it's per transferring of that property.
I see. So by transferring title, that's when it initiates. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So then they have their transfer taxes. Buyer and seller will also, depending on the time of year, pay their installment of property taxes. If
I
they have
see.
not already paid them, we need to make sure that that obligation is taken care of when we're in escrow. Uh,
Right.
and
And if
then
they have not paid their taxes for whatever reason, the seller will have that deducted from their net gain.
correct. Yeah,
Perfect.
that and any penalties that have accrued.
Okay. Well, let's hope that's not the case.
Yeah, we're coming up. We're about 13 days away, from the installments becoming delinquent. So they were due February 1st, but they're going to become delinquent April 10th.
Okay.
So if they're
Yeah.
not postmarked by that day, then they suffer the penalty, and it's 10%. So
Yeah.
imagine if it's a $5,000 tax bill, $500,
Yeah.
just
That's
okay.
not nothing.
Yeah. And then the buyer will have their fees that their lender charges. Those can be all over the board. There's no rhyme or reason. It has to do with the loan programs, if they're buying down interest rates. So
But
there's no,
so bottom line, like everything's listed out in escrow and it's all like under closing costs. So all these different fees, taxes, points, everything is distributed and written out and you can
yep,
see it
everything.
all.
So it's all collected, and itemized on a closing statement for the buyer and the seller. They each have their own side. They don't see each other's side. So
Oh, okay.
so the buyer doesn't see what the seller's,
So if the seller decides to pitch in for closing costs or pay a portion of that or whatever, that would just be deducted on the buyer side. So the seller wouldn't see what he's paying
well,
or
I
he
mean,
would.
they can gleam, right? But they
I
don't see
see.
the actual statement.
Gotcha.
And so long as the credit that they're giving doesn't exceed the actual closing costs,
Okay,
then
it
we're
can't
okay
exceed.
and the
Okay.
lender's okay. It's when the credits are higher than the actual collected closing costs, then the lenders typically mandate that we reduce the credit so they don't exceed the closing costs.
Right. So they can fund and everything will go clearly. That makes sense. Okay, perfect. So it sounds like we wrapped it all up. You did amazing. Thank you for your help today. I think it's going
Anytime.
to really give a lot of insight to the viewers and give them an idea of what the process looks like. So when they go in with wet feet, it won't be so bad.
Yeah. But we
Um,
take care, and if they ever have any questions during the process, we're always here to answer their calls, walk them through certain documents.
I know,
We can't
right?
give tax or legal advice, but
Sure.
we can kind of gently guide them on where to find the information,
Yeah,
or
that's
what
great.
might best suit them and their family.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, in our industry, we're 24/7, so the city that never sleeps, part two.
That's right.
All right. Well, thanks, Shawn. Have a great rest of your day. Talk
All right.
soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.